My special guest today in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics, is Ravens play-by-play extraordinaire, Gerry Sandusky. This guy is a football lifer. His dad played in the National Football League, was an assistant coach in the National Football League, was a head coach in the National Football League. Gerry Sandusky grew up around the game. So he's not your typical play-by-play guy. He has an extremely in-depth perspective about the game of football, particularly at the professional level. He's got a lot of good things to say about the Baltimore Ravens, as you would expect. Some great information. Very interesting what the Ravens think about the Cincinnati Bengals right now. I think you're going to really, really enjoy Gerry Sandusky. Hey, folks, we've got a big league announcement for you. Coming soon, First Star Logistics and In the Trenches with Dave Lapham will be showing our appreciation for your support as both listeners and viewers with a humongous giveaway. I'm talking massive, worth over $5,000 in cash and prizes. $5,000? You kidding me? Unbelievable. So make sure to subscribe, turn on your post notifications, follow me on Twitter to find out when it launches, and get all the details. Don't be left out of this one. You're listening to In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. We're in our amazing studios, as always, and we're joined by an amazing guest, Gerry Sandusky, play-by-play voice of the Baltimore Ravens. That's just one of your many responsibilities, though. Gerry, I mean, you're sports director at WBAL. I mean, you call basketball games at Towson University. I mean, you got a lot on your plate, my man.
Yeah, it's a busy fall, but it's better busy than bored. It's always been my philosophy. So it kind of keeps you on your toes, keeps you sharp.
So, what about your athletic career? Having played both football and basketball at Towson University, how does that help you transition into the broadcast world?
Well, first let's establish my career. I was fortunate enough to play Division I basketball and Division II football, and I redefined mediocre, Dave. I mean, I became the gold standard of average, and I think what it did is it gave me an appreciation for just how hard it is to be a great athlete performing at the highest level. Now, I grew up. My dad was a longtime NFL assistant coach, so I grew up around pro sports and the NFL. And then when you play at the highest level you can get to, I think it makes you a little bit more of a compassionate broadcaster and a little bit more of a broad spectrum broadcaster in that, every time a guy makes a bad play, quote unquote, he's not a jerk and he's not a dope and he doesn't stink. Just, somebody else had just a tiny bit more talent or a little bit better play. And I think it just keeps it all more into perspective. One of the things I've shared with people over the years is that it's really easy to watch a receiver run down the field and maybe drop a pass 60 yards downfield and blow a touchdown to cost the team the game. And, the whole town wants to just crucify the guy. But until you've run down the field 60 yards, looked over your shoulder, looked through a face mask, seen the world bouncing around, try to track the ball, you don't fully appreciate the skill set these guys really have and what they have to go through. So I think that was a big takeaway that I got from being a college athlete.
Well, that's a darn good takeaway, I'll tell you that. Okay, you mentioned your dad, and I've got something in, I guess, maybe a little bit tied to your family in that your dad was a great player. He played in the National Football League. I know he played for the Cleveland Browns. He was an offensive lineman. And then when I was a senior, I was fortunate enough to be invited to play in the Senior Bowl. And Mike McCormick's staff with the Philadelphia Eagles was our coaching staff. And your dad was my offensive line coach. And I'll tell you what, your dad's personality, I mean, that guy in a day, everybody in the offensive line that was there playing in that game loved your dad. I mean, your dad had an ability to just unify people, bring people together. He was an amazing guy.
No, I'm warms my heart to hear that because my dad was built to be an offensive line coach. I mean, he loved his players. He loved offensive line. He loved the relationships and he knew how to connect with those guys. And I think, being a player himself really helped, but he just, my dad passed away about 16 years ago. And to this day, I miss X and O'ing with my dad because he could explain complex schemes to somebody like myself who wasn't an NFL player in a way that just changed the way I saw the game. I think that's why I love football so much. Is just the dinner table conversations we would have of why is this team good and why is that guy good. I remember, as well as being a great coach, my dad was a great talent evaluator, which is unusual sometimes for coaches. And we're having dinner, and the Dolphins, he was coaching in Miami at the time, to demolish the Dallas Cowboys, Troy Aikman's rookie year. And we're talking the next day, and I said, you guys are great. You should feel good about that win. And he fast forwarded down the line. He said, it was an easy win today, but I'm telling you, that kid Aikman, he's going to be phenomenal. And that team, the Cowboys, they're going to be spectacular in a couple of years. And I'm looking at Aikman thinking he's a bumbling rookie, and the Cowboys, that they're a terrible team. And my dad could already see what was coming down the pike. And, I've learned to evaluate coaches over the years based on what I grew up around. Can you make the people you're in charge of better? And can you see the future and project what's going to happen? And those are rare gifts.
No doubt. I mean, to see a rookie that's part of a 1-15 football team as that season ended and unfolded, go to 3 Super Bowls during the course of his career. I mean, your dad was right on the money, and I'm not a bit surprised. The other thing about your dad is we had this big dinner, and it was kind of a dressy type thing. And they had a band, and some people were out there dancing with their wives. And your dad went out there, and I mean, just took over the dance floor, gliding around like Fred Astaire. I'm like, this dude is like, he's floating on a cloud out here. He was an unbelievable dancer. He looked like a professional.
It was something that I always had envy of, because I did not get those dance moves, and I did not get those feet. And he was an amazing dancer. He's so light on his feet. We used to always joke that you could roll a dozen eggs on the dance floor, and he could dance over top of them and not break one of them. And he was also this tremendous singer. He could sing like Pavarotti. Wow. So if he didn't stop the place with his dancing, he would stop it with his singing. And he just had that factor about him. But because of that, I've always looked at offensive linemen and thought they shouldn't evaluate them at the combine. Hell, just take them to a nightclub and see who can dance. Because what I've discovered over the years is a lot of these 340, 50-pound guys are really light on their feet. And if you're light on your feet on a dance floor, you probably have what it takes to have the footwork necessary to play in the NFL. And Dave, you've seen this for years. Everybody falls in love with, oh my gosh, he's got 3% body fat, and he can bench 900 pounds, and he weighs 360. They always look top down. Yep. You evaluate offensive linemen feet up. And if the feet aren't light and quick and fast, the rest doesn't matter.
Oh, you're exactly right. I mean, you can look like Tarzan, and if your feet are in concrete, it doesn't matter. And you can see a guy that looks like a truck driver. They just pulled off the street. But if the dude has feet and stay in front of people and stuff, he's got a chance, man. There's no two ways about it. You're right on it. Let's talk about now that we're talking about skills and relating to football and physical skills and all that sort of thing. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens, the opponent for the Cincinnati Bengals this Sunday. To me, I just think that the Ravens organization is amazing, from Mr. Bisciotti to Coach Harbaugh to Eric DeCastro to Ozzie Newsome to John Harbaugh to all his coordinators, assistants. I just think that organization is so much on the same page, and for them to lead the National Football League, 17 players are on injured reserve. And some of these players that are injured reserve, you can make a nice team out of, I mean, there's some good football players on IR and still 5-1. What is it about the Ravens organization?
Consistency. You started to touch on it. The Ravens, this is their 26th season. They've had 2 owners. They've had 2 general managers. They've had 3 head coaches. And the part nobody necessarily zeroes in on, their personnel department has been consistent over the years. And so because of that, when you have an injury fiasco like they've had this year and 17 guys are removed, some of those guys are in the front end of the roster, some are on the back end of the roster. You've got people in your organization who know how to attack both sides of the roster, who can find a Pat McCary, who's a backup interior offensive lineman, but they understood that he could play all 5 spots, and now he's your starting right tackle. You've got guys in your personnel department who can go out and rebuild a backfield when your entire backfield is decimated in the span of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of organizations that can do that, and there's plenty of talented people in the personnel departments around the league, but to me, it's the consistency. The owner understands what the general manager wants. The general manager, his personnel department understands what he's thinking. There's a relationship with the coach. The coordinators have been there for a while. When you don't have that time in together, there are a lot of mistakes that happen organically and not by, not because anybody's not doing the best job possible, but the Ravens have a lot of it. John Harbaugh and Eric are hand in glove, just like he was with Ozzie. Steve Bisciotti has a great relationship with everybody top down. The coordinators understand what John wants. And that just all patches into the personnel department, guys who've been there for years and get the big picture. So when suddenly you need a running back, suddenly you need, a backup tight end, the personnel department understands what the coordinator wants, what the head coach wants, what the GM's vision, and they're not just grabbing a guy off the street. They're finding guys that fit the big picture.
Yeah, they're seeing everything with the same lens. I mean, how great is that? I mean, that's a heck of a scenario. Let me take you back to the draft, Lamar Jackson's year, and he's still on the board at the end of the first round. And the Baltimore Ravens decide we're going to go with this guy. And what they've done since they drafted him is basically said, we're not going to draft you and plug you into a system that might not, be the greatest fit. We're going to draft, and we're going to surround you with a scheme, with personnel, with a coordinator. I mean, Greg Roman has done an unbelievable job putting together things that just fit Lamar Jackson to a T. And then everybody, like you talked about, surrounding with the appropriate talent. Take me through that process, that decision-making process when the organization said, we're going for Lamar Jackson. Here's what else we have to do to make it right.
So they draft Jackson, last pick of the round, Ozzie Newsome's last first-round pick. They'd taken Hayden Hurst, the tight end, earlier in the first round. When they take Hayden Hurst, you have Joe Flacco, who's the quarterback. You figure, okay, he's a piece that's going to help Flacco play for another couple of years as the starter. Once they take Lamar, everything changes literally at midnight. And from that point forward, they knew that they were going to have Flacco as their starter the next year, but they started to think, okay, when Lamar Jackson's ready to play, we can't plug him in and expect him to be a 7-step drop back quarterback who's reading as a cover 2, as a cover 1, is it a double A-gap blitz? We want him to be a guy who we can leverage his strengths, which is his athleticism, his vision, which people don't understand what a great vision he has, and his ability to extend plays. So they rebuilt the offense. Literally, they tore apart the playbook, and Greg Roman and John Harbaugh rebuilt the offense, and Harbaugh called it the revolution because they went really old school. They have some formations that if you go back and look at old NFL film stuff, it's single wing formations, from black and white film days. And so they do all of that to really put Lamar in the best position possible to become a great quarterback. And what has happened since then, Dave, is the part to me that's remarkable. Lamar wins the MVP in 2019. There's been a lot of great guys win the MVP. But have you ever seen a player, a quarterback, improve since he won the MVP as much as Lamar has improved as a quarterback in the NFL? That's the part that is mind-blowing to me. When he wins the MVP, he's a spectacular player, but he's not necessarily a great passer. He's not yet skilled in bringing his team back from a deficit.
Right.
You fast forward to 2021, this is a kid who, if you want to put 9 in the box, he can throw for 400 yards. If you want to take away his running game, he'll hit his receivers. If you want to rush him undisciplined, he'll find the gap and escape. There's so many ways that he has learned to beat defenses that he didn't yet have in 2019. And that is very much a function of the offense Greg Roman and John Harbaugh built, and then the coaching that Lamar has received. And I got to give the kid credit, too, the coachability he has. I mean, this kid's a mega star. He is a generational talent, and he knows the name of every single person in the facility. He calls everybody by Mr. and Sir. In an interview, he'll refer to me as Mr. Gerry. Nobody's done that since the kids in my neighborhood. And he's so respectful, he's so well liked, and he's so coachable. So you put all that together and you have this kid who's a great talent who gets better and better and better. And that's the fun part to watch.
The thing that I've noticed in watching him, develop like you talk about is when he would get out of pocket, he just looked to run. Now he looks to throw. And to me, that's the evolution process. It's like, okay, now you got a guy that's not just going to tuck it when he's out of pocket. He's going to, what do you do? Do you try to shut him down? He'll throw it over your head. Do you stay back? He'll run it down your throat. I mean, now he's like, oh my gosh. I mean, this guy, you talk about, in my mind, it's like you have to defend. Play one is the play that's called. Play two is when Lamar's out on his own, creating and extending, and you have to have a set of rules for Lamar rules. I mean, what do you do when Lamar's doing that? I mean, that's unique. That's not like anybody else in the NFL.
And Lamar has said that the game has slowed down for him, and you can see it because you picked up on it correctly, Dave. Before he gets out of the pocket, it's tuck and run.
Right.
And look, he knew that he was faster than most guys, and he had great instinct, and he could. And look, hey, nobody had any problem with that. But what Lamar has figured out is he gets out and extends plays. Instead of him making the first move and he's going to run and now the defense reacts, he waits out the defense. If the defense wants to spread out and try to play scramble roll with the receivers, well, that just gives him more field to run. If the defense wants to come up and take away the run, that gives him the opportunity to throw. And once he learned to be patient and let the defense commit first when he's in space, that changes everything.
Telling you, he's a nightmare. I mean, he's got the answer to every question on the test, man. It's like you're darned if you do and darned if you don't with a guy like this. I mean, he's something special. Another guy that I really like to watch and I really have a lot of respect for is Ricard. I mean, a 311-pound fullback / tight end / defensive tackle / Mr. Versatility. I mean, a guy like that, finding all the different roles for Pat Ricard. What was that evolution? What was that process like?
So Ricard comes in. He's an undrafted rookie free agent out of Maine. And he kind of makes a splash on the defensive line. The coaches every year the coaches find those 2 or 3 undrafted guys who think, hey, this guy has some potential. Well, they knew he'd also played some fullback in college, and sure enough, an injury gives him a chance to try him out. He shows he's a great hitter on special teams. And then the coordinators start jockeying over, well, you know what, give me him for half the practice because I think he can be like a wrecking ball type of a lead blocker. Well, we really want him at defensive tackle because he's doing a great job of he's soaking up a couple of different bodies and he can take 2 gaps. And it was really interesting to see how they would kind of like wrestle over how much practice time they got with Ricard. And he was just one of those guys who, wherever you put him, he succeeded. Now, as time went on, he really found his home at the fullback, the H-back, the wing back, because as well as being a really, really good blocker, he's a pretty nimble receiver too. And so you create matchups that you think the defense has the upper hand. He's fast, he's quick, he's got great hands, and he's way more elusive than you would expect a 311-pound guy to be. So to his credit, he had a camp opportunity. Everybody would have looked at him and said, okay, that's a camp body. And instead, he showed, you know what, I can do things most people can't. And the Ravens coaches and, you know, Ozzie and Eric DaCosta recognized that very early on, and they found a role for Pat Ricard.
I'm telling you, that's one heck of a story. Let's talk a little bit about Mark Andrews, who's so essential to the Ravens offensively. What kind of a year is he having?
He's having an epic year. I mean, he leads all tight ends in receiving yards.
Right.
And he's benefiting from the fact that for the first time in the Lamar Jackson era, you can't just take away Mark Andrews.
Yep.
You know, most teams up to this year schemed it this way. All right, go cover 2, make sure we have coverage on the top, and Hollywood Brown doesn't become a factor. And then bracket coverage, Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Well, the problem is now that you have Rashad Bateman, Sammy Watkins, who was hurt last week, but he comes on the scene. Devin Duvernay has all the speed. You can't double cover everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Andrews has a gift, and it's a gift. When he first came, I'm watching him in minicamp. And Dave, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the guys like this. I'm looking at him thinking, why did they draft this guy? So I'm standing next to one of the Ravens lead scouts, and I asked my question. I said, just educate me. What did you see in this guy? He just doesn't look that special. He runs a little stiff. What did you see in him? He said, nothing you'll see when they're in shorts and running around playing touch football.
Yep.
But when you put pads on, he has a unique ability to find the open space, man or zone coverage. This kid just knows where the open space in the defense is, and he knows how to find it. He just has a knack. And sure enough, once the season rolled around, Hayden Hurst, who was the first-round pick, just kind of became the backup, and Mark Andrews became the primary target at tight end. And he's just developed this rapport with Lamar. So you have Lamar, who knows how to extend plays and adjust to what's going on. Mark Andrews, who knows how to do the exact same thing. And if you watch the coaches' tape, they'll start a play. Let's say it's designed to go one way. They'll both instinctively just reverse it because they both see the open spaces in the other direction. So he's really, he's got the measurables, the size, the speed, the hands, but his gift isn't those basic things. His gift is he understands in football what Wayne Gretzky knew about passing a puck in hockey. Put it to the empty space. Put it where they aren't.
Unbelievable. Yeah, some guys are just, have that football savvy, man. I mean, and that mental telepathy stuff. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have that a little bit. They seem to have that unspoken connection where all they have to do is look at each other and know exactly what each other's thinking. And it looks like Andrews and Jackson have that same type of thing. So let's move. Let's talk about the running back position, because like you mentioned, you go through one set of running backs is on injured reserve. You have another set playing, but they rushed for a bunch of yards last week. I mean, it was a pretty impressive performance. Everybody scored a touchdown.
All three running backs get in the end zone. Lamar gets what he needs to get. And what's been interesting is that there have been games where Lamar's the lead rusher.
Right.
He'll have the big game, and it makes sense. And they're still, other than the one game, they're still rushing for more than 100 yards, but they're not doing it with, for the most part, any running back having more than 50 or 60 yards. It's been by committee. And part of that has been the coaches and Lamar getting to know Latavius Murray, getting to know Devontae Freeman, getting to know Le'Veon Bell at a unique level that the Ravens running game has that a lot of other teams don't, and that is the read option. On the read option, Lamar's got to take the ball. Just happen to have a ball here handy. He's got to take the ball and put it in. It's in the running back, just like you would in a handoff.
Right.
The difference is the running back has to understand that sometimes Lamar is going to let go of the ball and sometimes he's going to pull the ball out.
Right.
If the running back holds on to it too tight for ball security, Lamar can't pull it out, and invariably the play gets blown up. Or if the running back's too loose and Lamar wants him to carry it, he'll fumble the ball. So it took a couple of weeks for Lamar and the running backs to get a feel for each other. But I could see this past week, 2 weeks, they now have the mesh point.
Yep.
And Lamar now has the confidence that all three of these running backs know when he wants to pull it back and when he wants to give it. And that same thing he had with J.K. Dobbins, he had with Mark Ingram, he had with Gus Edwards. He's now getting with Latavius Murray, with Le'Veon Bell, and Devontae Freeman, which opens the running game back up.
All right, let's flip real quick to the defensive side of things. Don Wink Martindale, who I think and a lot of Bengals coaches that I've talked to think should be and will be a head coach in the National Football League very shortly here. And I know you don't want to lose him, but he's a gifted guy, a talented guy. The last 3 years led the NFL in blitz percentage like 44%. He's over 40% again this year, still in the top four. I think he's maybe fourth at this juncture. Same type of mentality. How different is he approaching this year's defense as opposed to past years?
I give Wink a lot of credit. He's been the blitzer. You had the numbers. I mean, Wink blitzes. You get the idea. He probably blitzes in his kitchen. If he's got somebody working in the yard, he'd send him on the blitz. Everybody blitzes. That was really the thumbprint of his defenses. And what he's done this year is he's mixed things up. He didn't blitz Patrick Mahomes this year. He played cover 2. He's mixed his coverages up. He's used the blitz very strategically, and he still loves the blitz, but he's not afraid to play coverage. He's not afraid to rush 3 and drop 8 in coverage. And I think he's really expanded his repertoire of what he can do and what he's willing to do. And that makes the Ravens defense far less predictable and far more effective. And I think that really is a tribute because, look, Dave, when you're really good at something, the tendency is do more of it. I think the psychologist Abraham Maslow said, "He who is good with a hammer sees everything as a nail." And it was easy for Wink, I would think, to say, "All right, the blitz didn't work. We'll blitz more guys." But instead, he's been much more thoughtful in where he uses, much more strategic in where and when he uses his blitz, and where he doesn't use his blitz. And that, I think, that lack of predictability is helping this Ravens defense start to evolve into a better defense.
So who's playing at the highest level in the various 3 levels of the defensive group position-wise?
Up front, it's Calais Campbell. I mean, here's a 14-year veteran who's playing like he's a 4-year veteran. He's playing with energy. He's playing with motor. He's blocking field goals. He's blocking passes. He's blowing up runs. He's in the backfield. I don't know how a guy with his experience is still playing that impactful. It's a beautiful thing to see. And because of that, he's bringing some young guys along with him. Ravens have a young defensive lineman named Justin Matabike, who is going to be big. He's going to be a big deal. And it's because he's learning the disciplined approach from Calais Campbell. It was interesting. Matabike spent a lot of time with Aaron Donald in the offseason, learning a lot about Donald's work ethic. But around the Ravens players, they've taught him that on this defense, when you're a D lineman, you might have 3 or 4 weeks where nobody calls your name, but you're still doing a great job. Part of it is making sure nobody gets to that second level. And on the second level, that's where the Ravens have had some inconsistency. They have 2 young linebackers, Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison, second-year guys, both draft picks. They didn't get the benefit of preseason games and OTAs as rookies.
Right.
Everybody anticipated a big jump in their effectiveness this year, and it hasn't happened. They've been inconsistent. They've had some great plays, but then they've had times where they struggled in coverage, where they didn't do the run fits well. You know, a lot of the mistakes young guys are going to make on defense. Fortunately, Josh Bynes, who you know well in Cincinnati, comes back for his 3rd tour of duty and has done what Josh Bynes always does, no matter where he is. He settles things down.
No doubt.
He slows the game down for the young players. Josh might not have the speed, the size, the strength of the young guys, but he's showing them how to get into the right position for each defense head call against a play that presents itself. And since the Ravens have started to put Josh in there more, you're seeing better play from Patrick Queen, better play from Malik Harrison, who are starting to kind of get it, seeing a veteran operate on the inside.
He's like the coach on the field. Coach on the field, isn't he?
He really is. And he has that same impact. You know, guys really gravitate towards him. On the edge, the kid to keep an eye on is Odafe Oweh, the first-round draft pick edge rusher. He's special. And it's his speed that you won't believe when you see him in person. Rashad Bateman is the first-round draft pick of the year. He's the first of the 2 first-round picks.
Right.
Odafe Oweh has the same 40 time as Rashad Bateman did.
Wow.
So you watch Oweh come off the edge, and these really athletic quarterbacks start scrambling and running, and he's tracking them down. So he's somebody who's really lighting things up. And then when you get to the back end, I mean, Marlon Humphrey is world class. He is a true all-pro. He has blanket coverage on guys. He's gifted at separating the ball from ball carriers, and he is just that guy that can rise to the occasion. So you have these leaders at all 3 levels, and part of the Ravens' success defensively has been what I call the huddle factor. If you're a young player and you make a mistake, it's not the sideline that you hate to go to get yelled at by the coaches. It's the huddle you hate to go to because you knew you let those leaders down. And that tends to really help develop young guys and raise their level of play.
No question about it. Yeah, Humphrey's the best puncher in the league. That dude can punch more footballs out than anybody I've seen. I mean, he's incredible at it. Let's talk about the all-important 3rd phase, Chris Horton. He's got, in my mind, Justin Tucker is the best kicker to ever kick in the National Football League. Sam Cook is as good as any punter. And, I mean, you're number 1, number 2, and number 3 in 3 out of the 4 special teams areas. Has special teams really dictated field position and been a big contributor to wins?
It does, and it has, and it's come back. You know, Jerry Rossberg was here for a long, long time, did a great job. And then, you know, Chris had that challenge of you never want to be the guy who replaces the guy.
Right.
You never want to be Phil Bankston. Right. Most people, you'll remember, most people don't. I say, Phil Bankston. Well, who was he? He's the guy who replaced Vince Lombardi as the Packers head coach.
Right on.
You don't want to be Phil Bankston.
No doubt.
And so the first year Chris came over, he did a solid job, but the unit just didn't have the same magic. And you thought, all right, let's see where it goes. And to his credit, man, Chris has delivered the magic. He has found his voice as a special teams coordinator. He has found his touch, and the unit has really responded to his coaching. And now you're seeing not only the greatness of Justin Tucker, but you see coverage teams that are equal. You see the ability to block field goals that keep you alive in a crucial game. And you're starting to see those magical plays that flip the field. So, John Harbaugh's background is special teams.
Right.
It's always a point of emphasis. It's always a point of high expectation. And Chris Horton's units are delivering.
So let me ask you about the injury factor. We already talked about 17 guys in injured reserve. Obviously, they're not going to be part of the equation. Are there any injuries of concern in your estimation? Does it look like most hands will be on deck?
Well, Ronnie Stanley's out
for
the year. That's a colossal one because he hasn't played since week 1. So it's not like they lost him from last week. But the problem is he's still got 11 games left. Alejandro Villanueva's done a really nice job moving from right tackle to left tackle. Pat McCary's done a great job filling in at right tackle. But can they make the run for 11 weeks?
Yeah.
That's the big question. And the depth behind them, you have Andre Smith, one of your old guys, who was out last year with COVID and in training camp looked like a guy who was a veteran who had missed a year. He just doesn't have the speed, the footwork. He just doesn't look as comfortable as he once did.
Mm-hmm.
And as the season's progressed, he hasn't played as much. So I think there's a big drop between who the Ravens have as starting tackles now down to what they will have as backups if they don't get those guys developed. If they need them, how many times can you go to the backups and maintain the, arguably the top running game in the NFL? That to me is the single biggest question. The second one is Latavius Murray hurts his ankle against the Chargers last week. Hasn't practiced yet this week. So now you're down to 2 backs again. And the big thing for me is Murray has been a great short yardage and red zone running back. He's found the end zone 4 times in 6 games. So if you lose him, even for the short term, this is an offense that had Gus Edwards, then it had Latavius Murray. It's the read option, believe it or not, is not the primary feature of this run game. The primary feature of this run game is the power. It is the power run game. It's knocking guys off the block and having a big body slam in there and wear guys out because look, as big as defensive linemen are and edge rushers are, they're human beings. They start getting worn out. They don't want to see that big body anymore. And that's when the read option has its effectiveness. So the one I'm keeping an eye on is Latavius Murray because, again, you rebuilt the backfield once. How many times can you find this big body that's a part of the power offense?
Right. Good point. All right. So final question, and appreciate you carving all the time you did because I know you're a busy guy. You're a popular guy in Baltimore, my man. So what do the Baltimore Ravens coaching staff and players that you've spoken with the Ravens think about this year's Cincinnati Bengals? What's their thought process there?
So the first thing is across the board, this Bengals team's legit. This is not a Bengals team that they had a weak schedule or they haven't played anybody. They know who the Bengals are, and there's a tremendous amount of respect. What Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have done on that offense, but also the rest of it. Tyler Boyd got a lot of respect for what he's done over the years against the Ravens, and T. Higgins caught a lot of people's attention. There have always been some pieces with the Bengals in the last few years, but now there's pieces everywhere. And that's really what strikes the Ravens is that your secondary is playing at a super high level. Your linebackers are getting it. I think Sam Hubbard's done a great job of anchoring that defensive line and bringing guys to a point where they are playing their roles. They're not leaving big gaps open. They're not making mistakes. The big takeaway to me is you don't have anybody on that team being selfish. That's what really strikes everybody here in Baltimore is that this is a Bengals team that is talented and unselfish, and that is a dangerous combination. And Burrow has, you've seen it firsthand as we look at him. We saw him once last year. Obviously, all the tangibles, the big arm, good feet. But to me, what makes Burrow so dangerous, his vision. He sees what's coming. He sees the blitz. He sees what's open after the blitz. He sees the stunts. He's got a Microsoft processor in that brain because he knows if this is where it was designed, here's what's open. If this is what they're doing, this is where I'm going. You don't see that in second-year quarterbacks very often, which is probably why he's the first second-year quarterback since Dan Marino to throw at least 2 touchdown passes the first 6 games of the season. That is not a fluke. That is not an accident, and that's not just arm strength. That's the processor that makes him so special.
It's interesting because last year he had he got Ravenized. He got sacked 7 times, got hit 15 times. And just this past week, I saw Herbert get Ravenized. If you have not seen the Ravens, what Don Wink Martindale can do with that personnel and with his scheme and all that, if you haven't seen it firsthand, one thing watching tape, but when you're out there and you're facing live bullets and it's happening, boy, that can be. And if your offensive line is not, recognizing and communicating well enough, and there's free runners and you're getting pounded, I'm telling you, boy, that'll Ravenize you. And I think it's interesting to see how Joe Burrow is going to take that process that he went through last year, compartmentalize, learn from it, and move on, because it can be, it can be tough to overcome. You can't let one period of being Ravenized turn into multiple times being Ravenized. You just can't have it happen.
But Dave, judging from what I've seen from Burrow this year, I don't think that's going to be something that will leave a permanent scar.
I agree
with Joe Burrow because of that processor. You hit the word, he learns. I talk about how Lamar has improved so much since he won his MVP. I thought Joe Burrow had a great start to his career, but he's vastly better quarterback this year.
Yep.
Because he's seeing everything and he understands. It's one thing to see it, but it's another thing to trust what you see. Mm-hmm. And he trusts what he sees. He knows what to do with the ball. So he has, a year ago, he wasn't up to speed for the kind of speed he was going to see from that Ravens defense. And for people who don't fully understand what the Ravens do that's unique, it's a positionless defense. It's the easiest way I can explain it to you.
A good way to put it.
Most teams are coaching, okay, there's your safeties, there's your corners,
yep.
here's your Sam, here's your Mike. When Wink Martindale sets up a lot of his fronts, yeah, there's defensive linemen, but there might only be 2. He might have 7 along the line, only 2 guys with their hand in the dirt.
Yep.
So who's what role? Who is the Mike? Who's the, he designs this defense to have a look where it's literally positionless. And if you're a young quarterback, that's really hard to figure out. I suspect Joe Burrow would be much more successful at facing what he saw last year if he sees a version of it this week.
And that's on the offensive line too. I mean, they have to recognize and and communicate amongst themselves so there's no free runners. And I think the offensive line was a big reason that Joe had the problems that he had. It starts with those guys. There's no doubt about it. It's interesting. I think, and I mentioned to you there was a final question. I apologize for you're just like a Ravens thesaurus, man. You're unbelievable. But I think it's interesting. Like, if I'm an offensive lineman going against Don Wink Martindale, it's like, man, now I have to make sure that I have all, my I's dotted, T's crossed, P's and Q's. I have to be so good mentally. But then I better have it right and be ready to go, because they are in your face and they're going to hit you right in the mouth, man. So you're going through this mental process and all of a sudden, boom, there it is at you physically. And it's like, man, it can be. So you have to go out and play with confidence and conviction. If you're like, do I do this? Do I take this? Do I block down in this gap, or do I take that? You're done, man. You're done. And he puts that element of doubt in your heads a little bit. And it's like, now all of a sudden, you're playing on your heels a little bit, and that's a tough deal.
And look, in the NFL, where the margin that separates talent is about as thick as a hair,
yep,
hesitancy, you lose. Defensive backs always say if he's even, he's leaving. Yep. And coaches know that if it's counterintuitive, you spend so much time in training camp and working on the game plan and practicing, so everybody understands it. But on game day, they don't want you thinking. They want you recognizing and reacting.
Yep.
And so the confusion that the Ravens try to cause on defense is to make guys think and doubt themselves. Wait a second. Is that what we practiced? Is that what we thought? Is he coming? If he comes, do I have? And that little bit of hesitancy is what opens up spaces.
And Wink is as good as anybody in coming up with something different and new. I mean, he'll every week it's like, oh man, that wasn't exactly the way we had prepared. He is great at doing that. And if you don't get it solved, he's going to keep doing it to you until you figure out a way to get it solved. So it's going to be an interesting chess match. I'm looking forward to this football game. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Baltimore Ravens organization and what they've done from top to bottom. I think, Ozzie is Ozzie. I've played against Ozzie and I just marvel at the guy's career in every way, shape, and form, and Baltimore does it right. I'll tell you that. And I look forward to catching up with you, sir. Hi, Dave Lapham here. Have you heard about In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, presented by First Star Logistics? Catch new episodes from the world of sports and broadcasting. Search for In the Trenches with Dave Lapham on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.